All right, I want to do a quick walk and talk tonight about the subject of perennials versus annuals in agriculture. So I was reading in Mark Shepard's book, Restoration Agriculture, and in it, he talks about the advantage of perennials over annuals. When you grow an annual crop, you know, like humanity's staple foods, whether it's corn or rice or millet or peas or beans, those type of crops, when you grow them from seed to the final crop that you want to eat in 1 year, that's an annual. And the disadvantage to an annual is the plant has to grow from seed and build its entire structure before it produces the fruit. When you have a perennial, say a mulberry tree, we've got mulberry trees here, and my kids, they get gallons of mulberries out of that tree. And the tree's been there for years. You only have to plant that tree once, right? And then it's there. We also have persimmon trees on our property, and those persimmons, they get super full of fruit in the fall. And if you plant enough trees, you can plan the seasons out so that there's always a fruit growing, whether it's blackberries or mulberries or any number of berries that you can grow on your property. Now, these woody plants, the perennials, there are other advantages too. They keep the soil structure intact, meaning they can reduce erosion or eliminate it entirely. They get green earlier in the spring, and they stay green longer, producing fruit, in other words, a longer season. They can also devote more of their energy to producing the fruit and nutrition on the tree, as opposed to growing the structure itself. And so there's lots more fruit that can be had in a perennial crop. The example he gives of corn, you know, in permaculture, people say, well, can you feed the world with permaculture? And he gives an example of corn, how, if you don't mind, I'll give you the numbers on corn. I think it's kind of interesting. Corn, you can grow about 150 to 300 bushels per acre. Each bushel is about 56 pounds. And so you can get about 8,400 pounds of grain, you know, corn, from an acre. Now, each pound of corn has 1,665 calories, and you could get about 13.9 million calories out of an acre. So, all that being said, if you're going to feed the world from corn, you can get 13.9 million calories from corn per acre, which is enough to feed one person for 19 years. That's a lot of food. That's a lot of calories. Or conversely, a group of 19 people, you could feed them for a year on that. But that's not quite the whole story. There is more to it, because corn, if you went on an only corn diet, you would soon develop a host of deficiency diseases, like a lot of the world has. And so this accusation of can you feed the world, keep in mind that there are many hundreds of millions of people that are starving and are malnourished on Earth right now. So the current system with the monocropping is also not feeding the world. But if you do a comparison, you discover, like if you're growing these annual crops like corn, 45% of it goes to feeding cattle in this country. 45% of the corn produced goes to CAFOs, where they feed the grain to cows so we can get meat production, essentially. And that is a huge loss in efficiency to feed the cow grain and then to eat the cow. There's about a 90% loss of efficiency with each level there. Whereas if we were to, if the cow was to eat the grass directly and then we were going to eat the cow, you would conserve about 10 times the energy. It's called the trophic pyramid, but it has to do with just energy loss in a system, primary consumers and secondary consumers. A long story short, guys, is if you went on an all corn diet, you would develop a lot of deficiency diseases. You would be deficient in vitamin D, deficient in vitamin C, you'd be deficient in calcium. You'd have all sorts of problems that would develop. You'd be deficient in folic acid and niacin, which is vitamin B3, and retinol. And so you'd have a host of problems. In other words, you need more things. You need to supplement with citrus fruits to get a lot of that stuff, or supplement with meats from animals, ruminants that eat the grass, right? It turns out when you do the numbers, he calculated only 3 million out of the 13 million calories actually really goes to human consumption, which is less than 25%. And so he compares it to a permaculture setting where you have perennial crops of hazelnuts and grapevines and currants and mushrooms that can be grown from the excess forest. For example, I've got an elm forest behind me. You can find species of mushrooms that grow on those elms, and you can fruit mushrooms from those. You can chop down those elm trees and coppice them after a number of years and use it as a perennial wood source. So he calculated you can actually get more calories from the permaculture system and the adequate nutrition by comparison. So the answer is a resounding yes. We can feed the world, and Jeff Lawton is even more assertive about it, or more adamant about it, where he says, yes, we could do it immediately. We could do it in 6 months, where you just switch and you start growing these perennial crops instead. So there's a lot of advantages to it. I'm not going to knock all annual crops or anything like that. We would still grow them too, and we like to eat a lot of that stuff as well. But really, permaculture should lean more toward permanent type food producing structures and systems, perennial crops. And so if you've never thought about that, just give it a thought and think about where you can grow perennial crops, the things that you would like to produce on your property, how to get them started, and how to keep them going. So I hope this was helpful. All right, we'll see you later.